So I was watching BookTube today, what a surprise, and I was watching a relatively new channel called Mrs. Pizza Reads, great name there. Quite a new booktuber, she's just put out the BookTube newbie tag, although she has around 20 videos or so under her belt already, and it seems an interesting channel, so before all that I'd say go check her out. I'll leave a link below and give her a subscription. I'm sure she'll appreciate it. The reason I'm mentioning her, though, apart from it's always nice to promote newish people, is that, while watching her video, she was like sitting on the floor and her dogs came up to her. I thought that's great. I have a channel with my dog's name in the title, and he doesn't like to be on camera that much. He's quite camera shy, unless I kind of like really force him into it. I mean, even if the camera's on him for a couple of seconds, he'll look away. I don't know. It's weird. So I thought I'd try it. I started this video sitting on the floor, and which was difficult enough because though I think Mrs. Pizza Reads also has a hardwood floor by the looks of it. But I managed to get there. I kind of wedged myself between my desk and the bookcase. I thought I'll get on the floor, put the tripod up, and get Elvis to come up to me. Would he come up? No. He knocked over the tripod twice. And he just kind of ran away every time he came up to me, but then I had to adjust when I went to adjust the camera angle. He ran off again and all this kind of stuff. So it's very difficult. You can see him moving it back and forth there because he probably doesn't, think that the camera's on him necessarily. And I thought it's such a shame. So I'm determined, eventually, when I move to my new house, to have a setup that makes it much easier to capture him than the current one does. If I sneeze, it's not a huge deal. He'll be able to come up. I could probably do a fake one for you now. I've shown you on this channel before, but we'll do it and see how it works. It's almost without fail. Oh, see? I don't know. It doesn't matter. In the night, I can wake up and sneeze. He can be the other end of the house, and he'll come running. But you just don't like to be on camera, do you? Say hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Yeah, so it would be nice to, be sitting here chatting to you about my books with, Elvis kind of sleeping next to me while I'm on the, sitting on the floor with him and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it did take me almost half an hour to get up again once I got down there. I'm not as flexible as I used to be. When I think back about my time, living in Japan and the fact that, I used to sit on the floor all the time and, when I went to restaurants and things like that, of course, you'd sit on the tatami and whatnot. It's amazing, that I was able to do it then. I remember at first, suffering terribly, with my leg going to sleep and things, but you get used to it. So that was a failure. But anyway, as you can see, I made it up, and I'm back in my normal position for now, at least. So I tried. I know a lot of you want to see more of him, and, I'll try and work it out how we can trick him into doing it. Maybe I have to train him somehow to do it, give him some rewards for appearing on camera with me. But then, of course, I don't want to exploit him too much, right? He's got rights as well. Anyway, 3 minutes I've been talking about that, where the real reason I'm here is to talk to you about the greatest book ever written, and possibly the greatest book I've ever read as well, which is not a review, because I don't feel super comfortable as someone who can give really good reviews. I'm just not educated enough in the review business, but I can certainly give you a long opinion of the particular book, which you might have guessed because I haven't decided yet what the thumbnail will be, but knowing me, I'll probably leave a big hint in that. And it's also one, of course, I've talked a lot about recently because it's been my big read since the 1st of January. And that is, of course, Les Misérables by Victor Hugo, which I finished not last Sunday, but the Sunday before. And I read it in a little group read with Summer from Sterling Reads and Sonja Devenny, one of our lovely subscribers. And we had a little Voxer group and we would read through and we waited for each other. I mean, it took about 5 to 6 weeks to read it because, one, it is, of course, massive. But also, we have work and things like that. And we waited for each other at certain points in the book and whatnot. Now, I feel... It feels strange to me saying it's the greatest book ever written because I haven't actually read it, have I? I've only read Christine Donaher's translation of it. So from that, I've drawn the opinion that it must be a contender, surely, for one of the greatest books ever written, because it's incredible. It's incredible. I was, I think, halfway through it when I saw another booktuber who I won't mention, because when I mentioned them before, they didn't like it. But then I suppose that was maybe in a more negative context, who said they would never read it. They would never read it. And I think it's always difficult to be absolutist in things like that. I used to think, for example, Jane Austen, I thought, for want of a better word, it's like, 19th century chick lit. I'm not interested in it. But I read it, and boy, oh boy, was I surprised. I fell in love with Pride and Prejudice. I thought it was wonderful. Now, Les Mis, I wasn't keen on reading particularly. I'm not a big fan of musicals. And that kind of put it off to me. I felt it probably cheapened it or something, and I thought, it's probably a load of rubbish. And I've heard a few of the songs, and I'm not particularly enamored by them. I'm not a huge musical fan anyway, really, unless it's maybe, I don't know, some kind of Disney film like The Little Mermaid, or the live action ones I like Mary Poppins, but don't tell anyone, okay? I still enjoy watching that. Bedknobs and Broomsticks, of course, fantastic. Those things I can stomach, but I'm not a massive musical fan, which is odd because I'm a huge opera fan, but I don't like musical theatre so much. But why do I love this book so much? Why has it rocketed? It's difficult because, everyone who watches this channel knows my favourite book of all time is Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. Now, of course, they are in different leagues, Jerome K. Jerome was a fantastically funny writer. His books are much smaller. He appeals to my sense of humour. His book is the book, if I'm reading Three Men in a Boat, it's a book that makes me feel good. I can read it again and again. Now that position of favourite book is shared. It was already shared, to be honest. Jerome K. Jerome's Three Men in a Boat and Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island were always my top books. Now they're joined by Victor Hugo's Les Misérables. Now the reason for liking all three of them are different. What I like about this one is because I think it is an entire universe bound up within these covers. I think you wouldn't necessarily need another book. You have everything you could want from a book in here. Obviously, you have the main story, but then within the story, there are other stories. There are lots of diversions. Hugo goes off on many. I don't know if it's right or fair to call them tangents, because in many respects they are related to the story, but it's peppered with essays. Things on the Battle of Waterloo, or the Le Petit Piscopo convent, the Paris sewer network. And I know a lot of people maybe find that stuff not interesting, and they might say it's boring. However, I loved it. I loved it because you have in this book, you have a novel with a good story. You have essays and treatises, I don't know, on social issues of the day. You have history. You have travel writing, even to some extent. You have so much. I think you can get lost even in the footnotes. There's a chapter or a part where Victor Hugo talks about everything that happened in the year 1817. Now, you could spend a good year or more analysing that chapter and reading books associated just with that chapter alone. The amount of literature Hugo himself draws upon would also fill another year of your reading. So you can, really do a deep dive into the world of Victor Hugo and Les Misérables. Now, I came to this book primarily because of Sean D. Stanfast's enthusiasm for it. He has read it on several occasions, different translators. He also read it during the month of January, I think, the end of January. It didn't take him very long. And it was his first time reading this translation as well. I would say both Sonja and Summer also loved it. After we finished it, we felt a void. And it is a supremely moving read, I have to say. I mean, I like to think of myself as a, fairly... Oh, who am I kidding? I'm a big softie, of course. But I blubbed. I blubbed and cried more than once in this book. But that shouldn't put you off it. The size shouldn't put you off it. Did you see that? Somebody just literally threw that at me. Oh, this is going to be a weird video. But the size shouldn't put you off. There's been a lot of debate recently about book size and things like that. But, okay, you might think 1,300 and something pages is a lot. It is for one book. But as I say, it's not really one book. There's a lot of book to this book. There's a lot of bang for your buck. It is a book you could really, really get lost in for a long time. And if you think that you read, 5 books in a month, maybe they're 300 pages each, you've read the same number of pages, haven't you? So it's not, no one's really fazed about reading 300-page books in a month, perhaps, And it's just taking that same attitude, I think, when you embark on something like this. It also helps as well if you do it in a buddy read, because you motivate each other, which is what I thought at the beginning. However, the story itself and everything was enough to just draw me in. I got lost in it, and I could cheerfully have stayed lost in it, and it could have been longer, and I would have been actually very happy. As I came near to the end, I wanted it to finish because I wanted to know how everything was resolved or not resolved. I'm not going to give any spoilers here. I mean, I'm sure it's so well known. A lot of people know what happened anyway. But in other respects, I didn't want it to end because, you spend a long time with these people. And, Victor Hugo wrote this with 365 chapters. Surely not by accident. I don't think he did anything really by accident. So he has done it so that you can read one chapter a day for a year and you will have read this book. And the chapters themselves are fairly short. So there's really no excuse, to be honest. You could just pick it up now, read one chapter a day, and you'll be done. What's the problem with that? So what do I want to say? Anything else about it? No, I don't know. As I say, I can't go into all the details. I mean, it is fairly well known, of course. A lot of people have read it. A lot of people have given up on it. A lot of people have DNF'd it. A lot of people maybe didn't like it. But I love it. And I do think there is a strong case to be made that it must be really one of the greatest books ever written. And certainly Mr. David Bellos thinks it probably is, or at least he thinks it is the novel of the century. And of course, the century he's talking about is the 19th century. And I read this book hot on the heels of finishing Les Misérables. And it is a book about the adventures of the book Les Misérables. And there's, of course, some biographical anecdotes and tidbits about Victor Hugo himself. But it's mostly about how the book went from his head to being published and all the things surrounding it. And this is a wonderful, wonderful little book and a fantastic companion to this one. I would say to you, definitely, if you've read this and enjoyed it, get this and get the inside story, so to speak, on, how it came about. Now, this does have wonderful introduction, fantastic footnotes and all that kind of stuff. But there's still things that are maybe not explained there that will be explained to you here. And I read it both in this form but also on the Kindle, and I don't, it's been a long time since I've highlighted as much as I've highlighted because I just find this so wonderful, and I'm definitely going to read it. I'm going to reread it again next year for sure, and I think I'm going to have to probably read it maybe not on a yearly basis, but at least on a biannual basis. Now, does biannual mean every 2 years or twice a year? I mean every 2 years. I'm not going to read it twice a year, as much as I like it, of course. Because I know there's tons of stuff I probably missed. And there's tons of stuff that I want to go back and explore. I mean, as I said, that chapter on 1817 really fascinated me. And I want to get into, to grips with that and learn more about all of the things that he talks about. Now, Hugo himself seemed a really remarkable and interesting man. I have a biography of him that I will get to at some point in this year. And Probably not straight away. I've got a few other things I have to read first. But if you've read Les Misérables, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you thought of it. Perhaps you're thinking I'm just all hyperbole and exaggeration and it's really not that good. Or you may have read a different translation, and I'm sure that can make a big difference. I learned here the history of the translation of it, and I didn't realize, that English people, British people, didn't have access to a full unabridged, or at least, as unabridged as it can be, edition of Les Misérables until I can't remember which publishing house it was, but an Australian translator translated it in 2008. That's the first time the British had a kind of unexpunged, unabridged version of Les Misérables. 2008. Now, the history of the Chinese translation of that is pretty fascinating. They tried through various things, and there was like civil war, there was the Cultural Revolution and all that kind of stuff. The translators affected by the Cultural Revolution went back and tried to do it, and then they were a husband and wife team, I think, and the husband died, and the wife carried on and finished it and published the complete translated Chinese version in 1984. So even communist China was able to have a complete version before the United Kingdom did, in terms of British English translation. There was of course like the Norman Denny translation from the 1950s, which apparently is very good. However, he does fiddle around with it. He removes some of these essays and he sticks them in the back in the appendix, which I don't agree with. David Bellos also doesn't agree with it as well, for reasons you'll find out when you read that book. If you read that book. When you read that book. Because you are going to read it, aren't you? You are going to read it. You want to. It's one of those books that, and think of how impressive it is when you can turn around to people and say, Les Misérables. Yeah, I've read that. I did feel a bit of a sense of achievement. Next up has got to be War and Peace, because it's one I've started numerous times and haven't finished, but I started it years ago. I was still in my teens. So about 5 years ago. I think that's, I don't know. That's probably all I want to say at the moment. I could go on and on. I'm really enthusiastic about this book. There have been a few books I've fallen in love with in my life, and now Les Misérables has joined those ranks. So don't be daunted. Don't be put off by its size. Read the Christine Donaher translation. It's worth it, I think, especially if you haven't read it before, because I think, by all accounts, it is the most accessible translation. And let it draw you in. Bathe and bask in the digressions and the wonderful writing that Christine Donaher translates from Victor Hugo. Give it a go. Give it a go. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much. From Elvis and I, have a great day. Bye for now. Le jour de gloire est arrivé. Contre nous sera tyrannie, l'étendard sanglant élevé, l'étendard sanglant élevé. Entendez-vous dans les campagnes mugir ces féroces soldats? Ils viennent jusque dans nos bras, égorger nos fils, nos compagnes. Aux armes, citoyens!